The CA Board of Directors to order. I want to thank everyone for coming. For the board, tonight we have Janet, Alan, Ginny, Lynn, Sherry, Nancy, Dick, Milton, and Andy. And for senior staff, Sherry. Remind everyone of our civility principles. Please speak kindly, don't speak ill. Accept and give constructive criticism. Apologize earnestly. Respect others' opinions. Respect other people's time. And I also will remind everyone that we are live streaming this meeting. And so also in case the people want to come up and give resident speak out, that will also be part of the live stream. Closed meetings. We had several. There was a closed meeting of the Architectural Resource Committee on Monday, June 12th. In attendance were Sherry Faneroff, Deb Bach, Eva Marie Lambright, Tom Mungo, Gracie Bradford. The vote to close was 5-0-0. The reason to close was to discuss HOA Section 4, consultation with staff, personnel, consultants, attorneys, or other persons in connection with pending or potential litigation. The purpose of discussion of new and ongoing covenant cases. The closed meeting started at 1:07 p.m. and ended at 2:15. There was a closed meeting of the CA Board of Directors on May 25th, 2017. In attendance were Dick, Lynn, Janet, Alan, Milton, Nancy, Greg, Andy, Ginny, Chow, and Sherry. Vote to close was 10-0-0. It was closed under Section 4, consultation with staff, personnel, consultants, attorneys, board members, or other persons in connection with pending or potential litigation or other legal matters. It was also Section 6, consideration of the terms or conditions of a business transaction in the negotiation stage if the disclosure could adversely affect the economic interests of the homeowners association. The purpose of the closed meeting was an update on legal issues and a business negotiation. The closed meeting began at 10:50 and ended at 11:30 at night. Approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Nancy has moved. Is there a second? Sherry has seconded. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor? Unanimous. Thank you. Disclosure of conflicts of interest. None have been disclosed to me. Move on to resident speak out. Valerie, if we could have the list. Thank you. Okay, Joel Horowitz. Joel, welcome. Just give us your name and that.
Joel Horowitz, 5681 Harpers Ferry Road, Columbia. Frankly disappointed last time I spoke to you about the Paris Agreement, and I got all sorts of excuses when talking to several of you after the meeting. Begin with your mission to make Columbia a better place to live. In your strategic plan that you adopted in 2014, which includes environmental stewardship, conservation practices. And then I read your progress reports, and you talk about your environmental stewardship and your awards and the Nixon Farm. And last year you talked about the LEDs and the gas generating at the sports club. At least 5 pages of your website talk about environmental sustainability and climate change. You've gotten a $66,000 rebate from BGE for your energy efficiency for their heating and power unit, I guess, at Sportsman's. You've tweeted about the Sportsman's Athletic Club. You've on the website of the Energy Department for better buildings at the Sportsman's Club. For all you're doing, it seems that maybe you should try to get an award. Oh, you did that. You got several awards from the EPA for your energy efficiency in 2014. Jeremy Sharpenberg is quoted with, "Through our efforts, we will further advance our commitment to energy stewardship and lower energy costs by engaging and empowering Columbia community on this critical issue." We are honored to receive this award highlighting CA's commitment to energy efficiency. CA is actively working in the community to help people save energy and money while also making Columbia more sustainable as a whole, said Milton Matthews. Those are press releases from your website. You got in Howard Magazine in January of this year talking about your energy efficiency and what you're doing for the community and the energy challenge for the community to do it at their home and how CA is practicing what it preaches. But I heard that this was political. Well, a lot of what you do is political. Meriwether Noise, Meriwether itself, affordable housing, Columbia Development, Lakefront Development, Crescent, BWI Noise, minimum wage, living wage, ponds, pesticides, pond management, the watershed fee, village center redevelopment, easements for Howard County, your minority contracts you discussed, rebuilding Hobbit's Glen, the tennis club, your conflicts of interest among yourselves, the Inner Harbor, Mr. McCall, the solar farm is a political issue in Howard County that you're getting your energy from. People don't like that. So with all the stuff you're doing, all I asked was that you put out a press statement saying that you're doing it in light of what we're doing. Because the We Are Still In website that a number of the mayors around here and throughout the country and all the Maryland universities said, in the absence of leadership from Washington, states, cities, colleges, universities, businesses, and investors representing a sizable percentage of the U.S. economy will pursue ambitious climate goals, working together to take forceful action and ensure the U.S. remains a global leader in reducing climate emissions. And that's what you've already done. And according to Michael Bloomberg, he says the country's already halfway to the Paris goals. So since you're doing all these things, why can't you say and remind the community what you're doing? Because part of what you got your awards for was community engagement. So unless you want to give it back for your 2014 award, why don't you engage the community again and remind them of all the things you're doing and that they can do, and maybe join one of these groups and make a public statement.
Thank you, Joel. Any questions? Ginny?
Actually, I want to thank you. This is the first night we're streaming, and you just helped do what you asked us to do. Thank you. You let everybody know.
Well, I still would like a resolution on your behalf. I got an email from Mr. Kittleman this afternoon stating all the things the county's doing. I'm trying to find out if he's sent it to anybody else or whether I have to publicize his email, and whether he'd like to join the mayors of Laurel and Baltimore and Montgomery and PG County in
Alan, do you have a
recognizing
question
it.
for Joel?
At the risk of making it clear that you track these things better than I do, did we have a vote where we decided not to join something?
No, you just, I made the comment in the last meeting, and I talked to three of your people on the board, and they came up with a numerous amount of excuses of why you shouldn't do anything.
3 out of 10. If that's lobbying, you need to lobby a little.
I'm lobbying, because one of them was that you didn't have time.
Okay, thank you.
To reiterate what you're already doing, it shouldn't take more than a few minutes, especially if you join the group.
Thank you, Joel.
If you'd like, I've had some emails prepared. I can hit send maybe, and you can have this whole pile.
You can send them out. Joel's was the only name on the list. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? If not, I'll pass this down to Salaries. Approval of the minutes. We have 2 sets of minutes. The first one is May 11th. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of May 11th?
So moved.
Nancy moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Ginny seconded. Any discussion? No. All those in favor of approving the minutes of May 11th? Unanimous. Thank you. Now we're on to the minutes of May 25th. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of May 25th?
So moved.
Ginny moved. Is there a second? Sherry seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor of approving the minutes? Unanimous. Good. Thank you. Chairman's remarks. Okay, first off, I want to extend thanks to the 50th birthday committee, to all the CA staff who helped, and everyone else who helped with the cake cutting that occurred at the lake on June 17th, our 50th birthday date, and also for the Lake Fest and the Luminarium. I hope you were able to get a chance to go in, and it was quite nice. Yesterday we had the 50th celebration for the People Tree, and also the rededication of the lakefront bells, and I thought that went very well. And I want to thank Alan Kittleman, who took time from his busy schedule to say a few words, and also Milton, and Karen Cherry from Howard Hughes Corporation. And then afterwards, there was the Columbia Orchestra Pops concert, and that was really great, and they had a super crowd. It was very, very nice. So, remind everyone, June 24th, 25th is the CA Open House. That's this weekend. June 24th, Ned Tillman is doing his nature walk around the mall. It's at 8:30 in the morning. I suspect that probably depends on the weather, but as of right now, it's still scheduled for 8:30 in the morning. Yeah, usually Ned's walks last about an hour. Also on June 24th, that evening, is the 50th birthday Young Columbians at the lakefront, 7 p.m. On June 25th is Slayton House Art Exhibit. I believe all of you have got an invite to that, 3 p.m. June 26th, next Monday, the Audit Committee will be meeting here at 7:30. You are all welcome. June 28th, the longest table is at Howard Community College, 6 to 9 p.m. Now, that does require registration, and hopefully all of you have received, the announcement. Last meeting, I had the date wrong, but now I got it corrected, June 28th. July 2nd, for those of you who are runners, Columbia's 50th birthday race is going to be held. And of course, June 4th, Longfellow has their parade at 10.
Maybe be July 4th.
July 4th.
Sorry, July 4th. Longfellow has their parade at 10, and River Hill has their parade at 9, and then of course there are fireworks. And then our next CA board work session is July 13th, 7:30 p.m. The lakefront activities start this weekend, so the schedule is out on the web. If you have an opportunity, there are 2 art exhibits at Howard Community College, both in conjunction with the 50th birthday and with CA. One is called The Heart of Columbia, very interesting exhibit, and the second is from our sister cities. Artists from all 4 of our sister cities have sent art in, and so I would encourage you to stop by. Both of those run until July 22nd. I did send out the list of board tasks for fiscal year 2018, so I hope you all got that. The Inner Arbor Trust Board of Directors has invited us to meet with them on August 7th. I know the board earlier had expressed the desire to meet with them, and we looked at our calendars, and since there really are no CA board meetings in August, or most village board meetings either have been canceled, we thought August 7th might work out well and give us and the board and the IAE board a chance to sit down and talk.
I'm sorry, what time? And where?
It's here. I think it's at 7.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we'll send out an announcement once we get closer
Will
to
there
it.
be a public speaker, resident speaker?
We'll work out the details, right? And then lastly, I want to thank Milton for his testimony before the County Council concerning the Long Reach Village Center redevelopment.
And the
Milton-
length of time, he said.
Yes. He did a good job. If you get a chance, you can see his testimony on television.
Andy, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Yeah, I was there that night too, and I want to compliment one of our colleagues here, Janet from CA, the CA rep. She did an excellent job as well. I think it's a tough situation, and I'm really glad that the CA Council took a position in favor of this. It's a really important project, and I know it's debatable what's going to happen with the county council right now, but it's vital, I think, to not just to Long Reach, certainly, but also to CA in terms of the potential revenue that'll be produced when the whole area improves. So it'll help CA as well. So, but you did a great job.
Okay, we're going to move on now to reports. Dick?
Andy, in his modesty, didn't mention that he also spoke at the bell dedication and recited a very appropriate piece of poetry, which I hope he'll share with us all at some point.
Oh, if you want, yeah, I can do that.
Yeah.
What Dick is alluding to is one of the streets in Owen Brown is named Far Bell, and it's taken from a poem by Paul Dunbar, and so it actually works out very well with the bell dedication, and so I read an excerpt from that poem, that bell dedication. Thanks, Dick. All right, we're going to move on to the President's report. Milton, anything you'd like to?
My question, I know that you've read the President's report, and so do you have any questions?
Any questions for Milton? Any? I mean, hopefully you've all been following the progress on the Long Reach tennis facility and on the swim center and the ice rink. And I want to thank CA staff for making that available. No questions for Milton? Move on to report from the CA reps to Inner Arbor. Report was submitted. Any questions?
Did
Jen-
the walk in the park happen last night?
Well, we'll try again. I'm almost suggesting that call me and we'll see if we can get 2 or 3 people together at some point, a couple of different times. I know Nina has been wildly busy, so that's certainly, I hate to task her anymore, but we can do, for those of you who have availability during the day, we might be able to do it during the day. We just have to we can't do it at concert time if Meriwether's having a concert, then it's really too busy for us to be able to walk around at the same time. So if there are any days that 2 or 3 of you know you can get together, tell me.
Dick?
I don't know if people are aware of it, but Nina had a nice interview in the Business Monthly, the June Business Monthly, and gave an interesting little account of what her plans are.
Okay, no financial reports. So we're going to move on to the draft assessment share formula. So Milton, is anything you want to say?
Jane is going to take the lead on this.
Good evening, Jane Devner, Director of Planning and Community Affairs. Good evening, and I want to talk to you this evening about the assessment share formula and the contingency fund. Somebody else can help me with that monitor. We convened a work team, and the work group is composed of, I chaired the group, and we had 2 village managers on the group, Kristen Schulder, who cannot be here this evening, Greg Barton, who's here from Owen Brown. Then we had Lynn Schwartz, who's our Director of Finance, and also our Treasurer. And we had Julie Goad, and she is a billing manager. We worked extremely cooperatively together, Shall I hold?
No, you might as well.
Begging your pardon, but do turn your chairs the other way. Thank you. So we worked very cooperatively, and I really thank the group for bringing their best effort and their brains to this issue. We met twice a month, sometimes more, since the fall to get to this place. I also wanted to mention that Craig and I will be doing the presentation. We're going to walk you through a little bit of our rationale, our thinking, the work we have done as far as analysis, and how the formula that we're proposing, recommending, works. We are going to share the results, but we're first going to make the presentation and then hand out the results and go over those. But there's some setup that we want to do. If you have questions about what we're saying, please do ask, but we may say to you we're going to get to that in a moment. So that's how we're going to go. Okay, so what is the definition of the assessment share? It's the formula that we've used to calculate the amount of funds that are provided annually to each association. It was last updated in 2012 calendar year and went into effect FY14. There has been some formula in place for now almost 2 decades, a little bit less. We also were tasked to look at the contingency fund. The contingency fund is made up of funds that are returned back, essentially. The villages are allowed to hold cash reserves year to year. Those cash reserves right now are somewhere between each village 60,000 to way over 100,000. But there's a limit, and those cash reserves come back to the contingency fund, which can be used to use exceptional one-time needs of a village or shared needs of the associations. So why do we need an update? The existing formula is really complex, and it's hard to understand it. It's also weighted to the kind of facilities and how many facilities, neighborhood centers and facilities that each village manages on CA's behalf, rather than on the mission, the core mission of each village, which is elections, community cohesions, covenants, and those kinds of things. It uses income as a disincentive, and we'll talk a little bit about this. I'll come back to that. And the current allocation is perceived by some to be unfair. And why do we mean by unfair? Given what you know about the villages, which village would you expect to have the largest allocation?
Each.
Oh, look at that. Okay, so why? Because on every measure, it's the largest. It has the largest number of the population, largest number of households. It manages the most properties as far as its facilities, our facilities. So of all of them, I just went through this. Yet it doesn't in the current formula.
Is it Owen Brown?
No, it's Long Reach. Yet Long Reach does not receive the most funding under the current.
I was thinking Owen Brown receives the most.
No.
No? Oh, okay.
So the starting point. Do you want to guess about that?
No, let's
We'll get there.
continue because we'll see it
Okay.
when you hand out.
So we wanted something that was easier to understand, that was not discouraging the associations from being the best that they can as far as renting out facilities and doing more. And we wanted it to reflect the size and mission of each village. The easy to understand and replicable was also really high on our minds. Something that there wasn't left to chance or to too difficult a formula. So what we did after some discussion was to separate the analysis into 2 parts. One focused on what I called the mission of the association, and one on the facilities. And then we wanted to identify factors that we could quantify that reflect the size and scope of each village. So 2 things we'll talk about. The mission definition includes the cost to operate the things that we know villages do in their charters, bylaws, apart from the facilities. So these are the things that are well known and well known to their colleagues in the room, our village managers. The community cohesion, the events, the services, the information, the advocacy, referral services, covenant work, and certainly elections. We thought at first that we would look for similar organizations and benchmarks. So how much should you spend on this? And how much should you, and how much does it cost to do this? And really there aren't any similar organizations, because if you have other similar organizations, they would pay for the full cost of their facilities. They had rent, they would do all the maintenance and capital improvements, be a whole lot of things. There just wasn't a good example. So after we struggled with that and looked at everything from churches to other things, we just realized that was not the way to go. So we looked at quantifiable characteristics. And the things that we felt are quantifiable are population and housing units, the number of properties, obviously that has to do with covenants and other things. And we also, another thing we found was annual charge revenue, and we'll come back to that one. But which of these are drivers of village association expenses? Well, it's the population and housing and the number of properties. Yes, Alan.
You also consider age of the properties in terms of it probably costs more to keep up with covenants in an older village than it does in a newer village.
We did not. We had the number of properties, and we'll come back to that. How we did that. So these are the 4 components in the mission share of the allocation as we're recommending it. It's the base amount, and that is the fixed expenses, regardless of the size. So everyone has things that they have to do. They have to have a village manager, so forth. They have to have, printing costs. They have to have, all kinds of things that they do. Then we have the village manager. You have to have a village manager, so you have to have funding for that. You have to have covenants control. So based on the number of covenants that you control, you need funding for a covenant advisor. And then population. Obviously, the bigger you are, the more money you need to service your, just like a city. If it was 1 million people or it's 50,000, it's a whole different way of getting in touch with your population.
If each village has a village manager, why is that a variable credit, and not part of the base amount?
We'll get back to that. Thank you. Yes, Craig is coming up right now. I am tag teaming with Craig on this presentation. The 2 other members of the committee that are here will be joining us in questions and answers. All right.
Good evening. I'm actually very happy to be here tonight because, to be honest, I'm tired of thinking about this. I'm ready to move this off my plate and onto yours. But before I can do that, I'm going to have to walk you through how we calculated each of these components. So as Jane was saying, that we divided what we're calling the association share, well, it's what we've always called it, the association share, into 2 parts. The first part is the mission hang on. The first part is the mission share, which has 4 components to it, and that's what you're looking at right there. And then in a second, we'll talk about the second part of the assessment share. First, though, I'm going to walk you through how we calculate these components. So the first component is the base amount. As Jane was saying, we feel like with every village, regardless of your size, there is a fixed amount of expense. And so we wanted to determine what that base amount would be that every village would get at the same level. And so in order to do that, what we did is we looked at our FY16 expenses for all of the villages, and then we took 7 categories, and those are the 7 categories you're looking at right there. Fees, operating and business expenses, those are actually two separate categories. Insurance, other printing, donations, taxes, and then furniture and fixtures. And then you see there it says half furniture and fixtures. Again, we're trying to calculate the base amount for the mission side. So that's why we're only doing half of the furniture and fixtures, because we felt like the other half of that is really facility-related driven expenses. So then, in order to calculate this base amount, we then charted out all of these, every village's expense. We took out the high and the low from each village. We then added up each individual expense divided that by the number of villages, and we came up with an average. We then added up all of the averages, and together that gave us a base amount. All right? Yep.
How wide was the range of expenses among villages?
How wide was the range? We'll
Yeah,
say,
so like the lowest village expenses versus the highest village expenses.
well, yeah, you would have to. So we did each category individually, but I could pull out one of the. So to give an example, so for operating expense, there's an example. The highest was $37,000 and the lowest was $5,000. So we removed those two.
Wow.
And we just left the 8 other expenses we maintained, and that's where we drew our average from.
And so out of curiosity, what was the range after you removed the high and the low for that one? Were they more in line with each other?
Well, I can tell you that what the average was then. The average then became 13,000.
We're going to give you all this information.
Yeah, you're gonna have this handout.
Okay.
Given to you.
Sure.
And I just got a question. What is donations? As that was one of the 7 categories.
Right. So each village has a donation line, so they make donations to various organizations and things like that.
For example, the schools, they might have prom night after prom, and things like that. You're in the
Okay,
thing.
yeah, all right, I get it. But that's not a fixed.
It's not. You're right. So
No.
from a technical point of view, it's not a fixed expense. We're not. So I know that from an accounting point of view, but we felt like that was a valid category to leave in as part of the expenses.
Okay.
Okay. So that's how we calculated the. That's how we calculated the base amount. Then, as Alan has pointed out, and he's actually correct. I actually thought about this as we were coming over in a way that it's another base amount. We said that every village is going to need a village manager. And so the way in which we came up with this credit was we were able to utilize the 2016 village salary study that we just had completed, and we took the recommended salary for a village manager at the 50th percentile, and we added in the 401k, and we added in the taxes that would go along with that, and we came up with an amount for that as well. Again, it's a similar base amount, but it's calculated differently, so that's why they weren't put together.
Yeah, quick. So would the expectation be that salary then would be adjusted for cost of living by the time we implement this? Because that study will be almost 4 years old at that point. Because
Well,
the 2016 study will be based on 2015 numbers if it doesn't go until 19.
We'll talk about the full amount, and I think you'll understand how those kinds of adjustments could be made in the future.
Jenny, you had a question? Great.
Okay. Then the other component is the covenant credit. This is based on the total number of properties within a village that pay the annual charge. The way in which we determined this credit was we first looked at the total number of properties in Columbia and in CA properties, in villages, within villages. We wanted to come up with the average number per village, and so we took the total number, we divided by 10, we came up with an average of 2,650. We then took that number and we went back to our salary study again, and we said, what's the cost what's the main cost that comes with covenant work? And we said, well, it's the covenant advisor. Again, we took the 50th percentile for a full-time covenant advisor. We took that, again, the whole package amount, the 401k, the taxes and all of that. We took that number and we divided it by the average number per village of 2,650. That produces a multiple of $22.31. It's that multiple then that we take back to each village and we times it by the number of properties within a village. So now we're beginning to actually have account for the variances of each village. The first two are essentially base amounts. They're the same. Every village gets the same. Now we're beginning to make that differentiation between the villages. The final component within the mission share is what we're calling the population credit. This is to account for the total population served by a village. And we identified the expenses, the two expenses that we were able to identify that would directly relate to the population within a village is the communications, which is primarily shows up in the newsletter expense, and then also in special events. Now again, we did a similar thing in terms of calculating this. We took all of the village's expenses on these two categories. We averaged them together again by throwing out the high and the low. We came up with an average. We added the average together. We then divided that by the average population of a village. So again, we took the total population for Columbia, this CA Columbia again, and that averaged out to 8,022 people per village is the average for a village. We then created a multiple of $4.39 by dividing that average into the total cost that we set up with the two categories. With that multiple, we're able to go back into each individual village's population and times their population by $4.39. That then gives you a population credit. When you add all four of the components together, you get the mission association share, which, as I said, is the first part of the total assessment share. To give you an example of what that's going to look like with a village, I'll use my own village. So here's what the results will be. So for the base amount, we determined that every village would be getting $38,552. For the village manager credit, every village will be getting $91,793. And then for the covenant credit, that's where you're going to see the differentiation. In my particular village, we have 3,115 properties. You times that by $22.31. That means my village will be getting a covenant credit of $55,837. On the population side, my village has a population of 9,785 people. You times that by the $4.39, which means we'll be getting a credit of $42. That would be devastating. $42,956. So that's that. That's the an example of the mission share. To help us maybe better understand where all of our villages rank in terms of property and in population, we've also prepared a little slide here to show you where you do rank. And I think the thing that you'll see here is that between the population and properties, the ranking doesn't change that much, but what you do see is there's a little flip-flopping back and forth. So Long Reach, of course, stays number one on both, but when you look at population, Hickory Ridge actually is second, but when it comes to total properties, they actually dropped to third. So between Owen Brown and Hickory Ridge, we kind of flip places with each other. And that actually happens almost all the way down if you look. There's a little bit of flipping back and forth between. And so it's actually a good thing because it helps to balance out the formula.
And there was no attempt to differentiate among properties, so a golf course is the same as a community center?
No, so the property has to be part of the annual, it has to be part of the annual charge, that's right. So with this in mind, then in terms of the ranking that in a minute we'll show you the actual dollar amounts, but before we get to the dollar amounts, we'll just show you what the, I'm sorry.
Lynn has a question.
Just one question. Do you count rental units in your population?
So rental units are counted in population, yeah. So that's the total population. So, but they're not. But on the property side, a rental unit is counted as one. So that's a differentiation. That's right.
So that a rental unit. So if there's several buildings in a rental unit complex, they're still counted as one unit.
They're counted on the property side.
Say Berkshire.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, because that is based on the annual charge, the properties that pay the annual charge.
So
But then we account for the individuals present on the population side.
Ginny, you had a question.
Yeah. In terms of commercial or retail, some villages, I believe, do covenant enforcement on retail or commercial.
Yep.
How do you count that in here?
So because of that, and because honestly it's a little complicated, we just went with the total properties. We went
Okay,
with,
so it's under properties, it wouldn't be under properties.
so you could have a and we all do. We have commercial properties within our village that we do not have covenant enforcement on some of them, but they do actually pay the annual charge. So we've gone ahead and included them as a property as part of the calculation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Alan?
Does what you said about apartments explain perhaps the flip-flops, that if we have
Absolutely.
one apartment building but there's hundreds of people
That's
who
right.
live there?
That's exactly it.
population goes up?
That's exactly right. So typically what you'll find is the villages that have more apartments are going to have larger populations. But they may have lower properties. It's not a huge, as you see though, even in that case, nobody makes a big move. You might move slightly down one, but you're not in your ranking, but you're not moving from third to eighth.
Was any thought given to weighting those four in terms of, is it, from a village mission point of view, is it harder to manage a large population versus a larger number of properties?
Well, so no, because what we tried to do is identify expenses that correlated to those drivers. Weighting it we felt like would have been arbitrary. I mean, we would just have to come up with some kind of arbitrary weight. And so instead of doing that, we tried to always correlate an expense to it. Okay? So, just so you get a little preview, on the mission share side of the formula, this is going to be the ranking. So Long Reach will be getting the most, as it says there. Owen Brown will be getting second, and then you can just see your way down. So this is the first half of the assessment share formula.
Do you have a sense for this part of what's the dollar difference between number 1 and number 10?
Oh, I have a good sense, because I've looked at these numbers 1,000 times. Well, you're going to see them in a minute. So now, the second part is what we're calling the facility credit, and the philosophy behind the facility credit, as it says there, is as opposed to the mission and association share, which tries to account for most of the mission-related cost. The facility credit is best seen as funding to help defray some, and you see the asterisks there, some of the costs associated with managing the community building. And the reason that we say some is because if you're not aware of this, that the village associations actually keep all of the rental income from the facilities that they manage. So we figure that rental income is really there to offset the costs that come with that facility. But at the same time, we recognize that there's other things that we do with our facilities that we're not necessarily in the business to turn a profit. So because of this extra funding that we receive because of the facility, we're able to offer free rentals, we offer discounts, a number of things that we do for civic purposes rather than just to make money. Now, how is this facility credit determined? We chose 3 areas of expenses to look at: the janitorial expense and wages, the utilities, repairs, and maintenance. And why did we choose these 3? Because we felt like they were almost exclusively facility-related expenses, and they really had little overlap with mission. In terms of the calculation, very similar to what we were doing in the other calculations. We took the total cost of all 3 of these items from the villages from FY16. We added it together. We then simply divided it by the total square footage of all the facilities that are under management by the associations. That provided us with a multiplier of $7.79. That $7.79 then gets multiplied back into each individual village's square footage. So here's the example for my village again. My village has a square footage of 6,824. You multiply it by the 779, and that means my facility credit is going to be $53,159. And of course, because of the way this particular credit is designed, your square footage ranking is also going to be the same as what you're going to be in terms of the amount of credit is going to be exactly the same. So if you weren't aware, this is the ranking for the square footage for all of the villages as well.
If I may add, on the other slides, you saw town center has the least housing units and least population. And they only manage 1 building, but it's one of the largest. So you see how their share is higher here.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, and what you see, like for instance, now my own village, now we're 8th. Owen Brown is 8th. Hickory Ridge, which was 2nd in population, is now last in square footage. Yep.
And that's fine, that last statement. My question is, how did you calculate the square footage of buildings? Because we had a dispute over that last time.
Yeah, that was already done for us.
You did have that dispute last time, so staff had hired architects to take that measurement, and that's when that dispute went away because we had measured drawings and whatever. So we used that same work that was done in 2012 after you had that disagreement on the existing. So we're pretty sure of those as best we can.
So the expectation is we won't have the dispute this time?
Well, I leave that to you.
Well, I mean, you didn't have a dispute. After last time, we didn't have a dispute, right?
That's correct. After it was external people came and measured the buildings for Columbia Association.
Is each floor considered separately?
Yeah, all the internal square footage of the building.
Manor has.
It has lots of rooms upstairs,
Yeah.
right? So everything was counted.
Everything's counted.
Janet, do you have a question?
That answer.
So then finally, when you add both the mission share and the facility share together, that combined is when you have the final amount of the assessment share. We have a little pictogram here that kind of demonstrates where each of the villages land with regard to the drivers that we were talking about in terms of population, properties, facility square foot. So you can kind of see what we've already just we're highlighting, that a village may on one category land at one or number 2 or something like that, and then in another category ends up at 9 or 10 or something of that nature. Now, having said this and having seen all of this, and as we've said already, your expectation, I'm going to show you the final ranking for the total assessment share, but having seen all of this, your expectation of who's going to be number 1 would be, well, it turns out it's Owen Brown. I don't know how that happened mathematically. It's something about calculus and Andy added it up for me. So anyway, so there's your final ranking of what it will look like in terms of amounts. Longreach will be getting the most. Longreach, I shouldn't say will be. They according to our formula, they would get the most. Harper's Choice would get the second most. Wildlife, and you can see as it works its way down.
How does this compare to the current formula?
You're going to be seeing that too. So I'm going to turn it back over to Jane now, and she's going to finish up.
Okay, so we have some other recommendations, which is to phase the new formula in over 3 years, and that's because there are some villages will get substantially more and some less, so we thought that was a good way to do it. Also, we were charged to look at the contingency fund. Again, as you recall, the contingency fund is made up of funds that were returned to a fund after the villages have extra money at the end of the year that they haven't spent beyond a certain percentage that they're allowed to keep back for their bulky expenditures or unanticipated expenditures. That contingency fund, it's sitting there, and it's only been used 4 times in the last 5 years, and in the last 10 years, a total of 7 times. And since the current formula went into effect in fiscal year 2014, so that's only 4 years that it's been in effect, the new formula, the contingency fund has been going since 2000. The percent increase has been 263%. So it's a huge pot of money that's growing really fast. It's not really well used. So we recommend elimination of the fund because of what I just said. And the existing funds, over 400,000, should be split between CA and the villages, with each village getting a one-time disbursement of approximately 20,000. And that would be the 400,000 divided by 2, and then dividing that amount, 200,000 by 10. That's our recommendation. Yes.
Why not return them in proportion to how they were?
So when it, does one of my colleagues want to answer that, or I'd be happy to take that question? I'll take it. So when the money comes to CA, it is then put in one pot, and so it's for all of the villages. So we thought it unfair to divide it in that way. And maybe one of my colleagues would like to answer that from the financial point of view. Would you like to come to the mic?
What's in the contingency fund now is the result of historical activities in the villages exceeding the reserve amount at a given period of time. And now looking forward, we're confident enough in the formula that the villages should be funded adequately through the go-forward formula, and that's why we felt a more equitable just splitting amongst all the villages was appropriate at this time.
Great. But there's a divided by 2.
Okay, so that's, I didn't, was that the question? I'm sorry.
That wasn't my
That's what okay, so what, and so.
The split between CA.
So we thought it was equitable, half and half, and the reason we did is because we thought to us it was clear that there were lots of excess reserves. And so that money had come from CA, and so that it seemed equitable just to split it down the middle.
In the proposal is a continuation of CA's funding of the benefits, the employee benefits at the villages, and that's what largely the funds would be used towards.
Okay, no, it's fine. But the way it was originally presented, I thought the villages and CA were getting the same share until I noticed.
Yeah, so it's a 400,000, 200,000 to CA, 200,000 to the villages collectively. So divided by 10, it's 20,000 and change.
Nancy?
So in the past, when there was an overage or an underage, either depends on which side you're standing on, the money would return to CA and then go into the contingency fund.
So if the villages make their budgets every year, so we haven't seen somebody not having enough money to run their operations, they're allowed to keep some reserves, and we'll go into that in a minute. And anything above that reserve has come back to the contingency fund. And as I said at the beginning, those reserves at each village, that's their money, is now somewhere between 60,000 at the low and way over 100,000 at the high. So we're talking that people still have a lot of money, and we've had money like building up in the contingency fund. So,
Alan?
Yes, a question for you, actually, Andy, in terms of our procedure here. Am I correct that this is a presentation, our purpose is to understand what's being presented, we will have a chance to debate this, so we should be probably noting what we agree with, disagree with, changing the mind.
Right.
It's not questions to ask them, and it's not
yeah.
Right. I mean, part of this was they're coming, we chartered them, basically. They're coming with their recommendations to us. This is the opportunity for the board to kind of see what the recommendations are, ask your questions. They will go to the villages too, in that.
Tomorrow.
But we probably will see this September, October, when it's finalized as part of the budget process. But this will come back to the board for a vote, and that's when we will actually have it. But this is your opportunity you have the committee here, ask your questions, figure out what they were thinking, why they choose this and that. Nancy?
Not the time to debate our...
No, not the time for us to
So my
determine.
question is, how do you see this moving forward then? If the money will no longer, let's say there is too much money in a reserve fund for the village, do you see that money going back to CA, or can they continue with their reserve
Let me
fund?
continue with the presentation because I'll get to that. Is there another question on this?
Lynn?
Is there any dramatic change to any one village's?
Yes. Yes, and I'll get to that. As I said, we're about to show you the results.
Jerry?
Yeah, my question is, could you give us an example of when the contingency fund has to have been used by a village?
So the villages asked us the year before last to fund a lawyer to look into how their articles of incorporation charter had to be changed or would need to be changed if they wanted to do electronic voting. So that was $25,000. They asked for $25,000. It turned out it cost $1,700, and it was fine. All the villages could do that if they want to add that if they wanted to. So that was one thing. So the salary study was another. It was something that benefited all the villages. It hadn't been done for many years, so they got approval to have the money, and then they hired their own consultant. And they did a salary study just the way CA had recently done a salary study. Those are two things. Can anyone else think of some others?
Individually, a village has asked for it when they had its own.
Yeah, there's only one case for that, and that was $10,000. Again, there's never been a huge amount of money, and that was the only one that I can understand that was real emergency.
Jane, Sandy, when you need to come up here if you.
So what she was saying was that there was one case with one village. It was about 10 years ago, and the village had some issues that were outside their expertise, and they had to hire a lawyer to do that. But you can only use contingency fund if your reserves are low enough, essentially. Yes.
Ginny, you had a question,
Yeah,
and Sherry and Alan.
This $400,000 pot of money, did you ever try and get any interest on any of it, or a portion of it, or anything like that, or it just sits there?
Can you answer the question?
All of CA's cash, it basically came into CA's banking system, and it's all invested to the extent that we can. So, yes.
Okay.
Sherry, you had another question?
Okay, I'm going to press on then.
I guess the other thing about the contingency, has it ever been used for any kind of catastrophic
No.
event where a building is concerned? There's a flood.
No, because the buildings are our responsibility in great, so the villages do maintenance and repairs, but pretty much all the capital is ours. $800,000 a year we spend, $400,000 a year on maintenance and repairs, and the villages spend a few $100,000 as well on maintenance and repairs in total. So that's mostly our responsibility. Sometimes somebody makes a mistake, a vendor in a building, and then they are responsible, if they make a leak.
Alan?
Okay, thank you.
I would like to hear from one of our village guests who was around then. What was this contingency fund wasn't there from the beginning, so somebody must have thought, some group of buddies must have thought it was a good idea. I'd love to hear what the rationale then was from one of our village folks.
How about
we get...
I try to address that since I was here
That would be great.
when they done that. I'm not sure.
None of them have a sense of that?
That came before all of the... So the sense was, way back when the contingency fund came up, it was noticed that sometimes villages seem to be acquiring large amounts of money, but we're still funding them. And so in essence, the idea was to put a cap on, I think it's the 15% cap. And then the question came up is, well, what do you do with that money? One of the thoughts was, we'll turn it back to CA. And instead, what was created was a contingency fund that villages could tap for joint or extraordinary expenses. And as it's been said, they've done 2 salary studies. They did web, they did the political. There's been a number.
So if I understand you correctly, I was under the misapprehension that there was some contingency needs that weren't being met, but apparently it was that it was CA's concern that some villages were getting too much money. Got it. Thank you.
So that's why the formula is being looked at again, one of the reasons, and that the formula, some villages, and I can let them speak for themselves, feel that they get less or more than they should. And you can see that in who returns money, who doesn't return money, who spends a lot of money at the end of the year so they don't have to return the money. I mean, it's just like a regular budget, but... So the other thing is the cash reserves. We've been speaking a lot about cash reserves. So currently, there is a reserve cap at 15%. And so essentially it's what the village is allowed to keep back. That's 15% of their CA assessment share. I mean, the actual expenses. So it's 15% of their actual expenses. We are recommending, since we're doing away with the contingency fund, to let the villages keep up to 30%. So it's a doubling, because we think that will promote efficiency and revenue growth. Now, there's no incentive to rent the facility more or take, and also there's not a great incentive to save money or not spend it, because you might have to give it back, right? So here you're expending. So somebody's cap now would be $60,000 for Oakland Mills, Owen Brown, for instance. It would be $120,000 that they'd be able to keep back based on their average expenses. So we think and particularly the village managers, I think, felt strongly about this, about the autonomy and flexibility in spending. So the amount over that cap would revert to CA, so not into a contingency fund, and we would use that CA for paying the other village-related expenses. This year, about $125,000 CA pays for the medical expenses of the village employees, as well as all the capital and operating maintenance and repairs that I spoke of, among other things.
Alan?
Given that there's this formula that you've put a lot of work in, you all put a lot of work into figuring out to the penny.
Right.
What's the rationale to have a cap at all?
So we also talked about that, and so we decided to double it because it's still a huge amount of money. So one of the villages that gets, for instance, I'm using Owen Brown just because I know that figure. It's in the middle of the group. It's not the top, and it can hold, under this recommendation, $120,000 back. That's a huge amount of money in a budget of the size that their annual budgets are, say $200,000 or $300,000, right? $400,000. So it's a huge amount of money to hold back. So if they can do that, that's great. But what would they be doing? Just like a contingency fund, what would they be doing with that money? Because they don't manage the build. They manage the building, but they don't have responsibility for the capital costs. And a lawyer or a salary study or whatever needs to be done, those reserves we thought would be sufficient.
Jenny?
For the work session, would you help me understand 120,000, say, times 10 villages? I realize it wouldn't be the same in each village, but just using that figure that you used. We have we being Columbia, all the villages, tremendous capital budget improvements to renovate, maintain all the buildings, we're losing then $1 million something that could maybe be used for something else. So help me understand. If the money's needed, you definitely want the villages to get it. But if you're just creating another fund, that's like the $400,000 fund that wasn't used. I'm just trying to understand and balance what the needs are, even in that village. Give you an example, Oakland Mills, the rink. We don't have enough money to do what we're supposed to do with the rink. So, in the work session, if you can help me understand that.
Well, if I understand what you're asking.
I'm new to this, so I'm trying to understand what you're doing myself. But
what I would say is what we're proposing actually has the potential to bring some money back in for the very things that you're talking about, as opposed to the way it's set up right now, where that contingency fund, if we maintain the cap, we maintain the contingency fund, that money just sits there. It sits there, and it only can be utilized in very specific ways, and so that's why it has been used so rarely. But if we do what we're proposing, and that is you raise the cap, we eliminate the contingency fund, and then any funds that in moving forward, any village that goes over the 30% reserve, that money gets turned back into CA, and it can be then used directly for expenses. And we're saying village expenses, but any expenses that would, like if that money was used for the healthcare expenses of the villages, then that allows other money from CA to be used in another way. So do you see what I'm saying? Yeah.
Greg, to use pile on here with Owen Brown, that's the example we have. I thought Ginny was asking was, notwithstanding that there's going to be a significant amount of money that's going to return to CA, is this still the best use of this money, just to sit parked there at the village?
Exactly, that's my point.
That's what you're asking.
My point is, you have a $400,000 sitting there that you and everybody else has agreed is just sitting there. It may be earning a little bit of interest, so you want to make it more productive because we have tremendous needs. Are you now, and I'm trying to understand this, eliminating that, but you're creating almost an equivalent up 15 to 30%, but it's in the village. But if it wasn't in their initial budget, it's sort of a little surplus thing that's nice, but it's money that's going to be sitting there. And would it carry over to the next year is the question, and add and add and add? If the village didn't say there was a need to begin with, are you giving them another little? I don't want to use the word slush fund. I want to use something more constructive. But are you doing that? Only it's by the village instead of this pot of $400,000.
Right.
And I don't think the village would be able to tap into that. I'll use Oakland Mills as another example. I think I heard we spent $2.4 million on the rink, but you need another God knows what to really do the job and bring that facility up to where it should be. And you're not going to be able to do that because the money's not in the budget. So if this money is going to be sitting there, can the village then say, well, here, we'll donate it to CA to be used for that?
So
Otherwise, you're just sitting, it's going to sit there the same as this 400,000.
So I think there's a couple of questions there. One is, we heard from the villages that they would like more autonomy and to be able to keep and have an incentive to run their business essentially better. So that's definitely something we did hear. The difference between operating and capital dollars, we don't need to get into here, but just a dollar saved here doesn't mean it's a dollar that we can invest in capital. But we did think that by taking away the contingency fund, which we do strongly recommend, that at this point it would be appropriate to increase the reserves because there wouldn't be a contingency fund. So that's something that you can talk amongst yourselves about. And also you could hear, and we're going to meet with the village managers tomorrow, so we can hear from them. And following up on Alan's question from earlier, we really value the questions that you're answering, hearing your concerns, or you're just getting your feet wet on this. But we're going to hear from the village managers who live this and breathe this. And we hope that we'll spend some time during the summer to maybe hone or think more about some of these topics so that when you come back, it will be with perhaps a refined recommendation to you.
I didn't actually get to ask my question.
Oh.
But I'm just trying to clarify what Jane's question was. The past uses of the contingency fund, as you talk about, 4 times in the past 5 years, 7 times in the past 10 years.
That's correct.
Can you, at some point going forward, find out what the average amount was every time? Or do you have that?
What would you like to know?
The average contingency amount when it was spent, when it was used. The 7 times say that it was used.
Okay, so
You mentioned the $1,700, but
the average, like how many times in 10 years? Like, so how much was the dollar figure?
yes, the average dollar figure.
Okay, so let's see.
If you need time, that's fine. I don't.
Yeah, I think I could get back to you on that because
That's
I
fine.
don't have.
Because my question is, again, building on Jenny's question, if we're saying, well, the villages still need to have some individual contingency fund, essentially that's what we're creating. We're saying there's no longer a village-wide contingency fund. Town Center's going to have its own contingency fund to do with, as it in Hickory Ridge will. But if in the past, with the times it's been used, actual evidence, it averages out to only, $10,000 a pop. Why are we allowing Owen Brown to keep $120,000 as its personal contingency fund? That makes no sense. Or Hickory Ridge to keep all this. I'm not sure it's the best use of this money is allowing them to keep that when there's no basis that we can see for them to ever need that amount.
Okay, I got everybody's. Nancy, and then Janet, and then Alan and Sherry. I got.
I think we're forgetting an important point. The villages have boards of directors, and they are responsible for the budgets and for the finances of that particular village. And so they are the ones who would have the input as to whether there's a reserve fund or how much is actually going to be needed and so on. And if there is a reserve fund, and each village does have their own contingency fund for whatever amount of money the board decides should be held in that fund, should be up to the village. I do believe that they should have more autonomy to make those decisions. It makes a whole lot more sense, at least to me, rather than CA being responsible for all of it.
Janet?
I was just going to say that if I get to the end of the month and I have $1 left in my bank account, I'm going to be really uncomfortable with that level of savings. I think this is equivalent to an emergency savings account where you account for unexpected expenses.
Well, you were just talking about the size of it, not the existence of it.
Well, I mean, I think the thing is like, for instance,
Let's not.
I just think
You
that
misunderstood my point. My point was not.
so certain expenses, the timing of them can vary significantly, so that 15% could be cutting it very close at certain times of the year.
If there's evidence.
Jane, what is management's view on these dollars? Are these dollars CA's money that we provide to the villages, or are these the villages' dollars that we are holding in lieu of them us doing their own assessments?
Okay. I think, yeah, which dollars, are we talking about the,
All these.
So I think
use
they're-
words like
I'm gonna have
provided to
Lynn-
each village as versus owed to each village.
yeah, so essentially I'm going to have Lynn come up and talk to us about the assessment, the annual charge. But CA collects the annual charge, and we do that by agreement. And I don't mean a written agreement, but that we acknowledge that the villages each have their own authority too, but have never done that because nobody wants to get two bills, and also the administrative cost of doing that. So CA does collect the annual charge, and we use it to run this organization, and the assessment share formula is used to allocate money to each village.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, CA management's position is it's a CA's money that we provide to the, I see Sherry nodding her head, that we provide to the villages.
That's close. It's based on our study of the association's allocation history, which we were able to look up in our files and goes back to like the earliest documents we had specifically were from 1974. But the philosophy has been from what appears to be almost the beginning to fund the village missions, So that doesn't really speak to who owns the money or whose money it is. That speaks to how much is required by this model to be given to the villages. Mm-hmm. And that's what we followed.
Sure.
All right, the question I had, there are guidelines that have been set up for the contingency fund. Is that actually a policy statement that a previous board voted on, and could we see that?
Yes, what I had in the beginning, which is the extraordinary expenditure needs for one village or the combined, special needs of all the villages or majority of villages. And yes, we can provide that.
Lynn, you had your hand up. And then Jenny.
So in this policy change, how long would that money be retained by a village?
So
into the next fiscal year, the one after that, or is there a point where it then comes back to CA?
So first I want to correct something I said. It's the contingency fund language is articulated in the management contract that is between the villages and the Columbia Association, which is how to manage the buildings predominantly and how to file your each village's financial records. That's quarterly and at the end of the year. And so at the end of the year, this calculation is done to calculate the reserve. So that's done every year. So every year it would be based on the first 15% or 30% of the expenditures of that village. So if this year I spent, $30 and it's 30% of that, then next year I spend $33, it's 30% of that.
Well, the point I'm trying to understand is that's real money. It's not just on paper. It's real money, and it's sitting someplace. If it isn't being, if there isn't this need to use it in a village, what happens to it? How long does it just sit in?
Yeah, right now it's in perpetuity. However, each village, I think, and again, we'll hear this conversation tomorrow when we talk with the villages, village managers. But there are lumpy costs. So there are costs, we call them lumpy costs. Essentially, it's something that you don't buy a refrigerator every year. You save up and you hope it doesn't break. You hope your roof doesn't leak, and you buy it only a new roof every 25 years. So a village, they don't buy roofs, but they do buy their own furnishings and so forth. And so again, if you needed a whole bunch of new equipment, video, whatever it is that you need to run your operation, to rent out your facility, you might not have that 1 year, and you might plan to do it for a second year. And I do want to talk about one other expense that we're recommending, if I may, is some other changes. First, Lynn had already said, and I think Craig did too, that there's no change, we're not making any change at this time to the arrangement that outside the assessment share, so if a village gets $100, outside that they get their current employees, whatever they have decided to take as far as their insurance option, that premium is paid by the Columbia Association to the village, and they pay the premium. So we're saying don't change that. So that's always added, and it's added based on the current employees at the time that the budget is formulated. Now, property of standard evaluations, does everyone know what those are? That's the curbside evaluation that some villages decide to do some years to look at all the properties that are under covenant control to see if there's anything from the curbside that they can see that doesn't look good. Because usually covenants are complaint driven, they're not inspection driven. And so this is the time they're at the village, and Harper's Choice is just completing the one that they've done. In the past, they've come and tried and used the Contingency Fund to ask for that. So that cost $25,000, for instance, this last time we funded it. We're recommending that that no longer be part of the payment to the village because they'll be able to keep their reserves so they can save up to do the assessment, the evaluation, the property value, as they would like. And as I told you, there's no one that doesn't have enough money. Some villages will never do this. It's not their policy. They don't want to, and other villages, do want to. We've funded several over the last few years. But we're recommending now that because they'll be able to keep money. So that would be a reason that they would need the money. It's not something they're going to do every year, but every so often they would like to do that, and they would have the funds to do that.
Alan and then Nancy.
Going back to the health life insurance, as I look at that, that looks like it so clearly aligns with the other things that there's a number of people divided by the whatever.
Oh, yeah. So this.
Why is the recommendation?
Because you don't, just because they have an employee doesn't mean they take health insurance. And we don't know which kind of a health insurance they would take. Are they a single person? Are they a family? Are they taking the HMO option? Or are they taking the, whatever you want option? And the difference for those is tens of thousands of dollars. So the formula wouldn't work. And also, every year, a family may change. A family's situation may change. Employees come and go. So once a year, we take understanding of what the employees of the villages want and who's taking the care, and that's how we have to do it. So it just doesn't work on a formula, and because the costs are hugely variable. And I wasn't exaggerating when there's a $10,000 or $15,000 difference sometimes.
When you said that, you said at this time, which made my ears go.
Oh, well, we are only in this time, sorry. We are not making any recommendation change to that.
At this time.
Okay. So we are, as the last committee who worked on this said, in 5 years' time, you should kind of look at this again. But we're saying that the variables, the population, the covenant units, the amount of property that you're managing each village, we could look at that every 2 years because that may change. Certainly in town center, it could change quite a bit just because there's new population coming on. And so that's why we said. Finally, we're talking to the village managers in a special meeting tomorrow. That'll be the first conversation. I would assume that we'll come back to them the next month if they'll have us to talk more about that, get their ideas. We then would want to consider any comments that we've heard tonight, and we hear from the villages, and then prepare a revised recommendation to you for your decision.
Alan.
Jane, our comments were questions to understand your thinking, not comments about your thinking.
Yes. So, well, that's right. So some of them we can hear one way or the other, though. I can hear a question and say, oh, did we think of that? Are we sure about it? So I think that they are very helpful. And if there are other things that you haven't said and the chair would like to collect those and provide them to us, we'd be happy to have that.
I'll let Dick go. Dick?
Will we get any accounting of the meeting tomorrow to find out what the various...
Sure. Yeah, we can certainly do that. Yeah, and I think you'll also hear from your own village managers as well.
I will, but just
yeah.
I'd like to get a general view of how they respond to this.
And certainly, if anyone wants to send comments to me, I will be happy to correlate them and then send them back.
That would be great.
That doesn't substitute for discussion among us to come up with a sense of the board about things.
I think it's too early for, essentially, I think that's what you do later. Right now, we're just trying to understand what your questions are.
I do think you want to also hear from your village board and village manager as part of this discussion too, not just us, because we all serve also in the village boards. Great.
I'm going to say, tomorrow, the villagers are hearing this for the first time, like we heard it for the first time.
Yes, sir.
So I don't know how much stock you can put in their initial reaction, which may be, the sky is falling, or something close to it. But then when you go back and discuss it, then
Right.
maybe it's a different reaction.
Right.
But one thing I'm interested in going forward is just this idea of incentives. What by changing X, what is the incentive that we're trying to create for a village to run itself
Yes.
efficiently?
Right.
And some things I'm seeing, I don't know if the incentives are going the right way. And I think for me, I'd like them to be some incentive. I mean, yes, there's some oversight, more than some. There is oversight of the village, how it operates, how much it spends by the village board and the village staff. But still, just want to know that anything we do is going to provide further incentive for the village to run itself efficiently.
Alan and then Lynn.
If my addition is correct, the Owen Brown example under this formula was 280,000.
Well, we'll see in a moment.
Take. Oh, you're going to.
Yeah, the spreadsheets are quite, they're not complicated, but they're small. So we just thought we're going to hand them out.
My question is going to be, how does that compare to their current shares?
Yes. Okay. And that's on the sheet as well. Okay. So we're going to.
Lynn had a question.
I do keep hearing that the villages would love to have, as you said, more autonomy, so that I would worry if we start measuring them on efficiency. I would think creativity, other things could come in there too that, would encourage more involvement in the village, because I think, as we all note, there's very little really community involvement in our village boards, or at least in mine. I don't know about some of the others, but I don't know if that's different in other villages. But this might spur more involvement from the community with the village itself to have a little more autonomy.
This is the last slide. Overall, the proposed share funding remains consistent with the current funding in place, kind of coincidentally. So it's not a radical departure. It's actually like $5,000 different from the total amount. However, some villages are up and some villages are down, and there are considerable changes. So that was why we wanted to phase it in over 3 years, and the spreadsheet that we're about to hand out, which we can do now, shows that. Shows each component, and then the total compared to this year's disbursement, and then a 3-year phase-in. Yes?
I understand that did you put that last slide up again? That was what I was. I lost it. It'll come back.
Okay, I'm sure it'll come back. So now I guess what I would like Craig to help walk you all through what we have before you.
Oh, I know what I was going to ask before we do, and I would like to do before this. Was there anything from the old? I know the old formula is complex, and I don't need to go over it all. Was there anything from the old formula, more philosophically, we included this because, or whatever, that has been removed that would be good for us to know about? So what is?
Well, it had some variables. It tried to benchmark or organize different kinds of villages. Yeah, okay.
Actually, this is very different formula from the old one. The old formula actually tried to take into account the total expense, and then what it did is it brought in what the projected income and then backed that out. And to be honest, that's the reason why Long Reach ended up not being the largest, receiving the largest share, because when you brought, in terms of what the formula allocated to them was the largest share. But then when you brought in their income and you backed it out, then their share drops. And one of the things we tried to do in this is not to de-incentivize, be a disincentive to revenue. And so our formula takes a very different approach. I mean, they were trying to calculate salaries, benefits, all of those kinds of things. And we're not coming from that angle at all.
And also, I think on the revenue side, was look at, well, you have a ballroom, but you have a hallway, and you have this, and you have these, and so what your rental potential. But this talks about allocating money based on what the expenses have been and should be equitably based on the mission and the facilities, and then doesn't fund everything. Right, so the incentive is then to make the money that you can make by renting your building as you would see fit to meet your budget, to make your changes, to add money to a salary, as you were saying earlier, to make it salary adjustments. Everybody's not at the median salary for a covenant advisor or a manager. So if they're paid higher, you'd have to have rents to cover that. If they're paid lower, you have more money to do something else. So that was their model was based trying to be on the facts rather than what they could potentially bring in on the revenue side. Because who knows if people are fully renting their building or they're not. You know, if they could do more or they're not. So we didn't want to go to that place, which we have felt might not be reasonable.
Nancy?
I kind of feel like Mama Bear is pushing the babies out of the cave. Is this?
What do you mean?
Well, I'm just thinking, worst case scenario, something happens, and a village, for whatever reason, is not able to meet its expenses because they have some crisis of some sort or whatever. Can they still come to CA? Is CA still going to be Mama Bear?
I think that's an interesting question. I think if you look at, I've told you about the reserves that they all have, and the contingency that's been in place since 2000, FY 2000, and that we have built up this fund of over 400,000, and in the last 4 years since the new formula has been in place, where we have fiscal end year, this is the 5th year, that fund has gone up by 263%. So in 4 years. I mean, I think that there isn't a problem with the money.
Nancy, we are open to a market rate loan.
So we have handed out. We've handed out 4 pieces of paper. One that goes through each of the share calculations by village, how it all works out, and then in yellow on that first page, you can see the change if that formula had been in, is in place. This formula for next year, what the actual change in dollars and percent change if you phase it in over 3 years. If you look above that to the proposed combined share amount, and you see the bolded number, how much it is today in the existing formula, and the difference, that is the line where you see the difference by village. So it ranges from a high of 120 or something like that, right? I don't have my glasses on, to some villages losing funds. But when you average it out over the 3 years for the first year, you can see that it's really minimal. And then if each village gets a one-time $20,000 rebate on the contingency fund, we felt, right?
It offsets.
It offsets it, right. So, and then the backup pages behind that, just to make you go before you ask your questions, are appendices. So the one is that it shows you the actual calculation that we began with tonight, explaining, Craig did, about where the expenses come from, those 7 categories, where the high and the low were removed. The second one is the population. And the last appendices is these facility expenses that we talked about, those 3 categories. And that's how those things were built and are reflected on the first page.
Alan?
Two questions. Minor one, but it just caught my eye. It says in 3 places it talks about 2.98% inflation.
Yeah.
Then the asterisk in the bottom talks about 3%.
Yeah, so that's
Are those actually
yes,
two
rounded,
different, or was that
rounded.
298
Yes,
rounded to 3? Okay.
I'm
not asking why that's important. I just wanted the difference. I get that you're proposing a 3-year phase-in. What I don't understand is if we look at the first set of numbers under proposed combined share amount, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 villages that have a negative difference. Why only 2 villages, when you go a third of that, have a negative difference?
because of the 2.9% inflation rate. If we're using that as an example. So if you were to add 2.9%, 2.98% to that, then actually the amount that they're losing that first year, that 33% decrease, actually is made up for in that inflation increase. So, by the way, so what you're looking at when you're looking at the combined share, and then under that it says FY18 base amount. We created the formula so that you're looking if we were to take the current share, current FY18 share, and just reallocate it with the new formula. So we're not anticipating that you're going to do 2.98% for FY19, but if you were, we gave you an example of what that would look like.
Right, that's a decision that's made. We have done that in the past based on inflation rate. And it was in the management contract that it would be 3%, but that has to be decided, and it probably should be flexible because we don't really know what could happen in our own budget. And also what the inflation rate would be. But that has been used for the last 5 years, the 3%.
Okay, any other questions? Hearing none, I want to thank the committee for their work and for their report. So I would strongly encourage all of you to look at this and to work with your villages and your village managers as you discuss it this summer. And as I said, this will be something we will address this fall, as part. And you've raised some really good questions, so keep them in mind. Thank you. Okay. Board action, consent agenda. Approval of the minutes of the closed board meeting for May 25th. They're approved.
When will they be released?
Hearing no objection.
No, it was on the consent agenda. And nobody took it off, so. We have to, that's a different thing. We have to, that will probably be next year when we do the whole set. Well, what we're trying to do this year is instead of saving up all of the closed minutes to like March for approval, and everybody's wondering I don't really remember what happened last September. We're going to try to get the closed minutes approved earlier, and then in March we're going to say, do you want to release them or not? Like we did. So that way they're hopefully a little fresher in your mind. So we're going to try that, see if it works. Okay, we're going to land transfers, exchanges, easement. Milton, do you want it, or do you want Dennis? Dennis, welcome.
Thank you. So the first one is pretty straightforward. It's the Woodlot stream stabilization. And that's a case where we own a piece of property between two county pieces of property. We have a deeply incised stream channel, and the county is going to make repairs to it for us at no cost to us, and then they are going to maintain it in perpetuity. I'm very much in favor of it.
All right. Is there a motion to approve that request? Easy request. Nancy moved and Dick seconded, I think I saw. So this is for the Woodlot Road channel stabilization. Any discussion? All those in favor? Unanimous. Thank you. Okay, got one of them down.
I want to roll.
Is this a new form? I like this form.
No.
So this is the form that last year Janet had kind of worked, and we've adopted it and gives you the information you've asked for.
The next one is a little more complicated. It's a series of easements and land transfers. Some of the transfers are to Howard County, some to Howard Hughes. The easements are related to minor modifications or minor changes that are required by the county for the roadway. And I think I said this before, but I think you probably remember Bob Jenkins came in and said he didn't want to transfer the property, these pieces of land, because he was afraid that the county would request more than they thought was at first. And this is a case where that happened. So they're really small. The land transfers come out to a negative 0.08 loss to the Columbia Association in open space, keeping in mind that we picked up all this property when we picked up a lot more than that when they gave it to us. So it's a very minor loss, and it supports the Crescent development.
Alan, you have a question?
I thought I saw something I think it was in our original deed, that says we can only sell land, transfer land that we own to a public entity, like the county.
Sure.
I have to go back and look again, but I know that we've looked at this issue and that's not correct.
Again.
Huh?
I will look again.
Okay.
Any other?
But these are land transfers, right?
And some easements.
Okay. So
They're not swaps, though. It's just
There are transfers. There's some land that we're picking up and some land that we're giving them. The net effect of the transfers is a loss of 0.086.
this is stuff we've already talked about these. Right?
We have.
yeah. I mean, it's called an easement, but it's not really an easement, right?
There's the easements and land transfers. There's a couple easements where they have to work on our property, and there's an easement for a roadway armory. So it's both.
Okay. So as Dennis said, if you look at the one page, the summary page, kind of gives you the 3 land transfers, the 2 land exchanges, and then the easements for working on different parts of the property. So is there a motion to approve the land transfers, land exchange easements? Lynn moved. And second?
Second.
Nancy.
Oh, I'm sorry. I did forget one comment.
Sure.
Or one question. Did staff say they were going to talk to, or did they have a chance to talk to Inner Harbor Trust to find out if there's some implications?
I talked to Nina and told her we were working on these, but there weren't any implications for her.
Okay.
Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor then of the proposed land transfers, lands exchange, and easements? Okay, so I have Lynn, Greg, Sherry, Nancy, Dick, Ginny, Janet, Andy, opposed? Abstain. Alan will abstain. Man, just 1 second here. I can. All right. Thank you, Dennis. All right, move on to the President's goals, proposed strategic objectives. So if you remember from our work session, there were 3 objectives that we had talked about changing, and I want to thank the people who worked on them. So is there a motion then to approve the revised set of objectives for Milton? Nancy moved to approve. Is there a second? Janet seconded. Okay, discussion. Okay, no discussion. All those in favor? That looks unanimous. Thank you. Okay, then we're on to the fiscal year 1920 budget schedule. So we want to approve this so we can publish it and get it out so that everybody, in particular the villages, know when certain things are due. So is there a motion to approve the fiscal year 2019-2020 budget schedule? Sherry moved. And is there a second? Dick seconded. Is there any discussion? Great.
It's just more of a question. I haven't compared this to past years. Are there any major changes to the general processes and timeframes we've had in the past?
No. No, I mean, the dates adjust a little bit, but the process is pretty much the same.
Right.
Um,
I mean, the process and the steps and
Yeah.
it's pretty much just finding the dates for the same things we did.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. All those in favor then of the budget schedule? Unanimous. Thank you. Okay, move on to tracking forms.
It's only 9:15. Huh?
You know, I can only guess which items might cause discussion and which ones might not, and we try our best, but looks like it might get done early tonight.
Just consider the efficiency, Greg.
Okay, so we have the board tracking form and the resident tracking form. And by the way, all of you did get access to the action, to the agenda topics log. So, as I said, we're going to be using that. So, okay, hearing no discussion, move on. If you look for your information, we have a report from the Village in Howard and also the Downtown Columbia Partnership. Janet.
That made me think of, for the advisory committees, is there a template that we're supposed to, so I know Nancy had provided some sort of like template of a meeting summary. I didn't know if that was available or if you made it up or.
No, I didn't provide it. Somebody on staff did.
I was just curious because.
Yeah, offhand, I can't remember that there's any actually set format.
Okay. My second question was, I thought we had discussed, I meant to email you this so that I didn't have to talk, but I thought we had discussed having the advisory committees come and present, and I didn't know if that was scheduled, and if so, how much time they should have and what they should prepare.
So guess what? Next month. Both our work session and our meeting. I can tell you the big topic is going to be advisory committees. So according to the process we established last year, we were going to be receiving a report from every committee. There are 10 of them. In addition, also some proposed charges that we can discuss. So at the work session, we will have the reports and the proposed charges. And certainly any of the committees are welcome to come. I mean, I don't know if all of them are going to come or if they'll want to say, but it'll be publicized. And then at the meeting in July, we will actually vote on the charges. That's going to be a big chunk of July, and the other part of July will be setting the parameters for the budget.
We mentioned also the lakefront.
Newtown zoning will be in July meeting. It won't be at the work session. Okay, it's not going to be at the work session because work session's filled. I mean, 10 committees, even if we only spend.
That's so. I know the art committee would like to come.
Sure.
And so I didn't know how much time I should tell them that they could potentially have.
What we did is we set aside a large chunk of the agenda just to address committees. We didn't give each committee a certain amount. I mean, I know some of the committees are going to be very, very brief. But yeah, the arts committee.
Yeah, I mean, it's like 10 or 15 minutes, a reasonable time frame, or is that too much?
I think about 10 minutes would be about max.
Well, the reason I mentioned the lakefront is that is moving along quickly, and if we're not meeting in August, this whole thing could be a done deal before we've had any chance to discuss it. So I would hope it would.
So we are checking with the county and the planning board to make sure we have a good idea of when it might come up, and we will make sure that the board gets to discuss it before, so we can, before it goes on the planning board. So that's as soon as we kind of find out that information, then we can kind of put it into the schedule. But yeah, it is one of the things that we are going to get to. It's just
When you say we, who's?
the board.
So we are checking with the county. Who's we?
Staff has reached out to the planning department and to try to get an idea, because right now they have to schedule it on the planning board. And we're trying to find out if Howard Hughes has submitted it, what's the timeline for it being going before the planning board?
And then from my point of view, what I'm trying to do is once I know kind of when the planning board is going to occur, then I'm going to backdate and figure out when we have two sessions that we can then talk about this.
Assuming we have that much advance notice.
Well, I was going to say the planning board is backed up, and they had some issues with getting quorum for their next couple of meetings, so I think things will get pushed up.
Ginny?
Is this going to require any additional action from the county council or the zoning board after the planning board?
No.
Well, it will go, doesn't it go to the county council from the planning board?
No, I don't, not,
Zoning board sometimes not. My guess would be no, but I want to.
these are, I mean, we will check on that,
Okay,
but
okay.
my thought is this is the design guidelines. And for the other two design guidelines, for Warfield and for Crescent, they only were done at the planning board.
I think you're right. I don't think it'll go any
Yeah,
further.
Andy?
Yes.
Except that what is being asked for as far as the lakefront, the changes
Right.
are changes from the general plan.
Right.
And the general plan was voted on by the county council. So I believe there will be another step required because it is a modification that has to be approved.
We will check into that.
Unless the general plan, which is just seen as advisory, and then.
It was voted on.
Yeah.
We will definitely check, to make sure. But as of right now, in Warfield and the Crescent, the design guidelines were just done at the planning board level.
Yeah. The only reason I was asking is the same thing came up with Long Reach, that there's a deadline where if it goes to the zoning board, there's a drop dead date where the zoning board will not hear anything because of the elections coming up, and I believe that's June 2018. 2018. So, yeah, we watch the times there. Okay, thanks.
All right, talking points. Valerie?
The assessment share formula work team described their recommendations in the process of developing them. By consent, the board approved the minutes of the May 25th closed Board of Directors meeting. The board voted to transfer land on Woodlot Road to Howard County for stream channel stabilization. The board voted to transfer land in Town Center to HRD and Howard County for developing public roads. The board voted to approve the revised President/CEO strategic objectives for FY18. And the board voted to approve the 2019-20 budget schedule.
Okay, one change. The woodlot was an easement. We're not actually transferring the land.
Voted to grant an easement.
Yeah, it was an easement, so they can go in and do the work, and then they're going to maintain it.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Okay, so hearing no objection, we are adjourned at 9:21.